Jeremy Pope stars on the new Netflix series Hollywood, playing a black gay screenwriter in the 1940s in Ryan Murphy's somewhat revisionist look at Hollywood during that time period. I'm Tony Ruiz of Gold Derby. And Jeremy, I can imagine that, when you go into audition for a Ryan Murphy series, how much did you know about this show going into it? How much did you know about what it was going to be?
I knew nothing. I'll tell you. At the time, it was sent to me from my agents, and it was just said Untitled Ryan Murphy Project. The role was for Archie, a ambitious screenwriter. That was kind of attractive, ambitious screenwriter. That was all it said. And the sides that they gave us to prepare were not from Hollywood. There was no script. It was very vague. So it was kind of hard to invest in the character and, figure out what it was that they were asking for. But we did the best we could with the size that they gave us. And yeah, I sent a self-tape in, and I think it was the next day we got the call that Ryan Murphy wanted to give me this part in the show. But again, we didn't know what it was. So while we were excited, we were still kind of like, well, what is it,
So at what point then did you kind of get a sense of what this was going to be? Like, were you able to see the whole script eventually, or just, maybe the first one?
I mean, basically what happened was that was kind of, the offer came in initially, and then I think it was a couple of days later, I was able to meet Ryan in New York City, and we sat and we talked, and he told me, what it was he wanted to do with the series, who all was involved at the time. I think at the time it was just Darren, Chris, and David Cornsweet. But he, was just spilling out all his ideas and wanted to hear what my thoughts were. And that's kind of where I started to get an idea of what this Hollywood was going to be. But really, it wasn't, I think maybe a month later is when he sent the first two scripts, part one and part two. And then we really got to dig in, and I got to see the colorful world that he had created, and again, what I had been offered and what I had said yes to do.
So one of the things that kind of strikes me, and I've read that you've said this before, is that Archie, there's certain elements of James Baldwin that you wanted in Archie. What was it about James Baldwin that you saw as being similar to Archie?
Well, for me, I'm a huge fan of James Baldwin, and just a huge fan of his mind. I think he was fortunate to travel around the world, so I think he was just so cultured, and he just had a different look on the world. And, when we were building Archie, Ryan was, excited that it was going to be this gay Black writer. And I just remember thinking in the 40s, man, that's two strikes. You got this Black man, and then he's openly gay. So I was like, he has to be bold. He has to be daring. And bold and daring to me is James Baldwin, and I think he was an incredible man. And he was outward about it. He spoke about his feelings and his thoughts on how the world was, operating at the time. So I felt, if anything, Archie would need to channel that energy and couldn't be scared. He had to be bold, and he had to be daring.
And yet at the same time, there is a certain, I think, as the series progresses, Archie does have some fears and reservations in terms of like how the script that he's written will be received and how his relationship will be received. So what was it like to tackle the two sides of that, the vulnerability of him and also this kind of daring independence of him?
For sure. It was interesting. I worked really closely with Janet Mock, who, was an EP on our show, as a writer in the writer's room, and directed I think, two of the most ambitious episodes of Hollywood. But there was there was a conversation we had where, spoiler alert, where Archie is being asked to change his script so that, Laura Harrier, who plays Camille, this Black actress, could maybe have a shot at, auditioning for the role. And we had this conversation, it becomes like a crabs in a barrel moment, because I think and I've had this conversation with other Black artists and entertainers, sometimes we feel like there's only room for one of us. So I think Archie's mission in Hollywood initially is he wants to break the mold. He wants to be the first person that writes a picture for all people and not just race pictures, which is what most Black writers were doing. But here we have this opportunity where Laura could just screen test, or Camille, the character, could screen test for his, his movie. And it was just interesting, the conversation we were having about, the discrimination from just the studio head, and then the kind of class system, and then discrimination against each other as far as, hey, sis, I'm proud of you, I'm happy for you, but this is the mission that I'm on. We got to really explore the different facets of the character, and just the struggles they could have been facing, that even though this is a fantasy, it's just, if you set yourself in that world, it's like, I can only imagine being in those conversations and in those situations, just the struggles they would have had to kind of go through. So I think while, I've mentioned Archie being so bold and daring and kind of testing the limits, there is this very soft and sensitive side to him, because he doesn't have much, and this is kind of everything. And he's sacrificing so much of himself. He's putting so much of himself out there in order to see that dream. And I think the dream is not just about him seeing the success, but like almost paving the way for the next generation, the wave of writers and Black people to be able to be seen in the industry.
And it's interesting that you mentioned that kind of softer and vulnerable side of Archie, because I feel like that part of him certainly comes out in the scenes between him and Rock Hudson, you and Jake Picking. And Jake told me that it was really, really important that relationship resonate. So how did you guys go about making sure that it did?
Well, it's interesting because me and Jake's first day working together was all of our intimate scenes, all of our sex scenes at the top of episode 1 and episode 2. So we had met prior to working together, but we just talked, like, where are you from? How'd you get here? How was your audition process? And that was kind of it. But the one thing I loved about Jake and our work relationship was that we really had to trust each other. We had those conversations about how these characters are ambitious and they're going after their dreams, but we needed a sense of home, like what was home for them. And I felt like they found home within each other. So it became the thing that was going to support them and root for them no matter what. I think they both are taking these chances and these risks and really putting themselves out there to, hopefully see the good things that they want and their dreams come true. But it needed to feel raw. It needed to feel safe with each other. And I think that was kind of the goal, is like, we need to feel safe with each other on screen and off screen. And I think having those intimate scenes being the first thing we shot, I really just had to trust him and know that he was going to have my back and he was going to be there and present. And he was absolutely that and much more. So it kind of set the precedent for like how we work together moving forward. And it was just beautiful. It was beautiful to have that organic relationship with someone off the bat.
And one of the things about the show that I think is could speak to a lot of people is the fact that it is a very queer positive story in a time where that wasn't the case. And there's some great scenes in later episodes where they cut to young people of color in their living rooms jumping up and down for certain reasons, which I won't go into now. That whole kind of, I think Ryan's called it faction. Mm-hmm. That whole element, why do you think that element works so well in this series? And why do you think it's so necessary at this point?
I mean, it's one of those things, I think, with TV, film, anything in that media, and I realize this in an abundance when we were working, is it oftentimes teaches us how the world works, and it gives us experiences, and it takes us places that we may never go to, or it gives us things that feel tangible. And I think what we're saying is, had someone seen a Black man success in a major way, in a commercial way, it only takes one movie. It only takes one person in the position of power to make a different decision on a certain movie that really changed Hollywood, that changed people's lives. And I think that is the bigger message in this. Is like, even for me, it's like, the more I see myself, the more I hear the Black narrative and the Black experience, seen in a commercial way and welcomed. It's like, you feel like you're welcomed and you feel like there is room and space for you and your story. And I think that is the message we watch, like you said, the black kid up and cheering. We watch an Asian family up and cheering. We watch so many different, demographics of people just rooting for these singular people to win, because it's bigger than just their win. It's opening up a door and a light to the community, to this suppressed and community that doesn't get shown a lot of love, and especially in the time of the 40s.
One of the things that I can imagine is that Ryan Murphy tends to cast his shows from a lot of different areas, but he loves to pull from the theater. He loves to pull from the theater community. And as somebody who really started in the theater, I can imagine that being on a set and doing scenes with Patti LuPone and Holland Taylor and Joe Mantello, I had to imagine that had to be somewhat of an awe-inspiring experience. What were those scenes like? And did you just sit on the set sometimes and go, wow?
Yes. Patty specifically, we had some really special moments, really all of them, all of the people you mentioned. It was a dream, and TV is different. This is kind of my first TV thing, and it was incredible. The Ryan Murphy family was so good to me and cared for me, and I had a blast. But when I got to work with those people specifically, it felt like I was right back on Broadway. Like, just everything went away, the cameras went away, and we were so present and there for each other. I think that's the one thing that theater has taught me, is you just have to be so giving to your scene partners. And I was so grateful to have them, to have a Patti LuPone and a Joe and a Holland, to act opposite with, So it was a dream. Sometimes I'd have to pinch myself that I was, having these major scenes with Joe. But on screen, he was amazing. And off screen, they're just great friends and great people to be around.
Obviously we have to talk about your Broadway. You had this kind of, singular experience, having two shows kind of open, kind of back to back, and being nominated for Tonys for both of them. And so a lot of people in their careers don't have that flexibility or that desire to go back and forth between theater and television and film. But you seem to certainly have that flexibility. What is it about being able to go back and forth that appeals to you?
I mean, I think for me, it's just, I'm attracted to great stories, and the power of storytelling. Theater changed my life. I was introduced to it in high school, and I found this community of people that were just so loving and giving and supportive of who I was at 15, 16. And I think I moved to New York just to get more of those experiences. I realized, in the theater, we could entertain, but also heal people and give hope. So I think that's my mission, is just kind of like, I'm a sucker for good stories and stories that uplift people and make people feel good. And, I was so fortunate to be a part of two shows last season on Broadway that did just that, Choir Boy, and then right into Ain't Too Proud, which we celebrated the life of the Temptations, music that I grew up on. I think that will be the coolest job I've ever done to my dad and my grandpa, who those guys were so cool to them. And, to have that was really special. And then now to be in a project like Hollywood, which is just, it's a fantasy, but again, it feels so hopeful and inspiring. And, this past weekend, we've just been, so much love and support has been thrown our way, just because people are really digging the series and the message behind it. And to me, that means the world, So if that means I'm doing it 8 shows a week on Broadway, I will gladly do that. But it's been so cool to have the same experience, working on the other side on camera.
Yeah, I've asked everybody who's been a part of Hollywood, and I'll ask you the same thing. There's been rumors of this becoming a kind of an anthology, and whether that's true or not, my question is there a person or a time period in Hollywood that you think would be ripe for this sort of treatment?
I mean, I think there's two ways. It's like, good question. I haven't really thought about it. So I can't play Archie, this sounds crazy, but I really want to play a pimp. I think like something about I've been just reading a lot about pimps in the industry and how big it was in the 70s and the 60s. So I'm interested in, sounds so crazy. I hope people don't judge me severely, but I'm interested to understand the mind of a pimp. That's what I'll say. So maybe there's room for a pimp in a season, whatever, of Hollywood. I don't know. But I would love to have the swag of a pimp and understand kind of what they do and how and what makes a good pimp.
You could actually get some tips from your co-star Dylan McDermott about that.
I just could. I surely could.
Well, Jeremy Pope, congratulations! Such a great series, and everybody go to goldderby.com, make your predictions for the Emmys, and stay tuned for more interviews throughout the season. Jeremy, thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate you. Be safe.